Hey y'all! Well, we're here today to do a little mini review on this Aiyima little chip amp from Amazon. And the manufacturer sent me this to me, or they reached out to me and said, hey, would you want to review one of these things? And obviously we don't do a lot of chip amp reviews, and so I don't have a lot of, reference to deal with. I have played around with that little Pass ACA amp, which obviously isn't a chip amp, that kind of is on another level. It's also a lot more expensive. I think just the kit's $350 or something like that. But I have played with a couple of other little chip amps. They were mostly Bluetooth connected, which, wasn't very impressed with. And so I said, sure, send this little guy to me. And you're probably thinking, hey, Skunky, why do you have these tube amps sitting here? Because this is kind of my reference about like what I listen to most of the time, and I don't actually even have other solid state amp here, and so definitely don't have a chip amp. So yeah, we're gonna kind of compare it to these two amps and then give you kind of my subjective thoughts on what it sounds like. Unfortunately, I tried to hook it up to the Analog Discovery 2, at least with the board and stuff that I have, and I was just hooking it up to one channel because I learned from my mistakes in the past about how that Pass ACA had a flipped output or whatever, and I did try it with the outputs flipped and normal, and yeah, either the Analog Discovery 2 or this little box went into panic mode, and so no smoke leaked out of it, so I'm like, I'm going to stop here before I blow something up, because mainly I do those kind of tests on tube amps. So we're not going to have any objective data here, and I'm just going to kind of tell you what it sounds like, how it functions, and all of that kind of stuff. So I compared it on some 8 ohm Klipsch RP600M speakers, and so I don't know what it does with 2 ohm speakers. I don't even know where you get 2 ohm speakers or 4 ohm speakers. So this doesn't relate to that. This is with like what I consider normal 8 ohm bookshelf speakers. This claim that it's got 300 watts, yeah, I'm not buying that. And that's okay. I mean, I remember in high school there were these little amps for your car that were this size that claimed they were 300 watts, and everybody knew they weren't. There was some kind of weird peak rating or whatever, and it doesn't say 300 watts RMS, so I'm sure it's some kind of peak rated with a Monster Max power supply or something. I'm not saying that they're, quote, lying, but don't expect 300 watts RMS output out of this little tiny box. I would actually rate it as a little less output than this 6LU8 amp, which was 5 watts RMS. So wouldn't expect much more than 5 watts of listenable volume out of this thing. And when you turn it up past about 5/8 to 3/4, it gets pretty distorted. So with a normal DAC, the output of a DAC into this, which is rated at 2 volts RMS. So, yeah, want to dispel that. This is not some super high powered thing that's going to, blow away a 100 watt Fisher amp that was made in the 1970s. That's not what we have going on here. So it is a nice little small footprint. But you got to realize the power supply brick is almost the size of this amp, and the power supply that it comes with is, let's see, it outputs at 36 volts, that's what it says, and then the input max on this thing is 24 to 48 volts. So we're right in the middle of the range voltage wise. My understanding of how these little amps work, the more rail voltage they have, the more power they make. And that's why I'm saying if you had a 48 volt brick, this thing might make more power. But with the brick it comes with, it's again, I can't measure it, but I'm going to say it's under 10 watts, which is fine. For most people, that's plenty of power. And so it's got simple controls. There's no tone controls, which is a bonus to me. I don't find tone controls on these simple kind of devices to sound good. If you need to do some tone curve shaping, you want to do it in your DAC or whatever is feeding this. On the back, you've got a power input. It's got an auxiliary out, which I've read the manual, but I can't remember what it was saying this is. It's got RCA ins, speaker jacks out. Now the speaker jack output's kind of weird, but I guess it's to make it fit in this small footprint. You definitely want to use banana plugs. If you try to use the little feature where you unscrew this and you stick a wire in, you're likely to short something out. And so I wouldn't recommend that. But it's got that function if you need it and if you're real careful. But anyway, so very simple. Rear panel, it's just got some vents in the side, vent in the bottom. It's got a mono stereo switch. I will say I didn't try it in mono. I just tried it in stereo because I have a feeling most people, that's what you're going to use this for. This is a really low price point HiFi product as well. So we are going to definitely take that into consideration, that we're talking about a well under $100 piece here. I think these are about $80 on Amazon. And so, yeah, let's get into what this thing sounds like. So, subjectively, listen to it through my DAC and also my turntable. I'll say it did sound better on my DAC. Normally my turntable has a little bit of a boosted bass compared to my DAC, and this already has a little bit of bass heaviness to it. And that said, the bass also is a little flappy, or a little distorted, which isn't surprising from something this small. But it's there. I mean, it's got a good solid bass response. And like I said, with a DAC, with the right tone curve shaped into it that kind of tones down the bass a little bit, it actually sounded pretty good. I was pretty surprised that something at this price point and this small a footprint would sound as good as it did. Now, let's compare it to the two other amps sitting here. So you got this DIY 6LU8. It's got some 15 watt Ed core output transformers. Puts out a good 5 to 6 watts, something like that. Yeah, it doesn't compete to something like this. But this is probably, retail would be $1,000, $1,200 tube amp. And so trying to compare a $80 chip amp to a $1,200 tube amp, that's not fair. This has definitely got tighter bass. It's got a little less bass response, I would say, but it's a lot tighter. And this did have a nice little kick in the upper mid bass. And so I could see using this if you had some speakers that maybe didn't go down into the bass region, like some really small bookshelf speakers, and you were wanting to supplement that with a small subwoofer, that this might really be the bomb. And actually, I think this auxiliary out was a sub out. You'll have to look at the instructions. So maybe they were kind of considering that this would go to one of those smaller pair of Klipsch bookshelf speakers, the really budget ones that wouldn't reach down into the bass, that this would have an issue with, and that then you would have a small subwoofer to go with it, and that might actually sound pretty decent. So definitely not saying, I don't want you to get the wrong impression. I'm far from saying that this is junk. I mean, this thing sounds surprisingly good, and it's like, light years above like a sound card in your computer as far as like the sound that it reproduces. But again, I'm used to listening to, $1,000, $2,000, $5,000 amplifiers, and I'm not going to pretend that this is going to compete with a pair of KT120 monoblocks. It's just, that's not going to happen. And so looking at this realistically, this is a good little starter thing to power some speakers and have some music. So let's go down here to this Musical Paradise MP301, which is I think they're $400 now. This is like what I would consider a really budget tube amplifier. This sounds better. And so, if you're on a budget, and like this is your max budget, or like a Rysong A10 that you don't have the ability to modify into like the skunky mods on it, and that's your max budget, buy something like this to listen to until you can afford to buy something in this range. Because honestly, this kind of budget product is a waste of money. They don't sound good. I don't think they're enjoyable to listen to. And if I had to listen to this or this, I would have this plugged in. And it's $80. And so that's kind of the long and short of this video is, no, this is not high-end hi-fi gear. And this is not, you can buy an $80 little unit like this, and it's going to crush a $2,000 hi-fi amplifier. That's just being foolish. But does it sound good for the price point that it hits? Absolutely. And that's kind of what this stuff is made for. So if you're just getting started and you've bought some unpowered speakers and you need something to drive it with and you want it yesterday but you don't have much money, don't waste it on something like this. Just buy one of these little chip amps, and this one seems pretty decent. Again, probably about max of 10 watts of output would be my guess. Don't put that in writing or sue me over that, but that's what it kind of seems like. To match what this does at half volume on the knob, I've had to turn this up to about a little over halfway, almost 5/8. And so, yeah, I'm just saying that's probably the power range of this thing. Again, if you get a, higher powered brick, you might get more power out of it, but I don't know if it's going to change the sound out of it. And is it worth spending $50 on a 48 volt brick to power an 80 watt amp? I don't think that's money well spent. So, anyway, I think that's going to wrap up this review. Again, I'm kind of disheartened that I couldn't hook this thing up to the Analog Discovery 2 and verify what I was seeing or hearing, but I'm not going to waste a lot of time trying to figure out why it didn't want to work with that or what the issue is. I honestly am not interested in turning this into a chip amp channel or trying to learn all about solid state, digital chip Class D amplification and how all that works. That's not something I have any interest in doing. But again, these folks reached out to me and said, hey, would you be interested in reviewing this? And I told them up front, it's like, hey, if I don't like the way it sounds, it may get a crappy review. And she was like, that's fine. Just, we appreciate your honesty. And so this is my honest review. I don't think this is a waste of $80 if you need to power some small speakers, and especially if you were using it for like lower volume levels, because I was trying to drive this thing to probably, high 80 dBs in my room with those clip speakers. And so, with your 8 ohms, so it was kind of pushing this. And again, maybe with 2 or 4 ohm speakers, this thing would have better performance. So, hey, I'm just telling you what I heard. So anyway, I think I'm going to wrap up this video here. Hope you're enjoying my channel. If you are, please subscribe. Please like the video. Please comment below on your thoughts on this. And I'll have to back up here one second. I had some guy that was arguing about how great this sounded, and then or how decent this was. And then I said, so what are you comparing it to? He goes, well, my reference amp is the lower end of one of these things. So guys, these are not reference amps. Let's don't pretend like they are. So anyway, till the next video, have a nice day.